I've been seeing a lot of videos lately saying that renting is better than owning in retirement. And you know what? I don't necessarily disagree with them. There are a lot of things I like about the idea of renting in retirement. You don't have to worry about replacing the roof. The furnace goes out, you will call somebody. You don't have to mow the grass. You can move if you decide you want to live somewhere else. Sounds pretty good to me. But there's one problem. I can't afford the rent. And I think that's the part of this conversation that nobody seems to talk about. Because whenever I watch one of these videos explaining why you should rent in retirement, the example always seems to go something like this. Let's say you own a $500,000 house and you don't owe anything on it. Sell the house. Take your $500,000, invest it, rent yourself a nice apartment, and let that money continue working for you. Okay, that makes sense. I'm not saying that's bad advice. If I owned a paid off $500,000 house, I might be sitting here telling you the exact same thing. But what if you don't have a $500,000 house? My condo is probably worth around $110,000. So let's use me as an example. I could sell it. After all the expenses involved with selling, maybe I walk away with somewhere around $100,000. Great. Now I need somewhere to live. And where I live, a decent apartment could easily cost $1,200, $1,500, maybe more every month. At $1,500 a month, that's $18,000 a year just for rent. So unless that $100,000 I got from selling my condo has suddenly learned some kind of financial magical trick, it's not going to fund very many years of retirement. And that's assuming the rent doesn't go up. So the problem isn't that I don't like the idea of renting. I'd rent in retirement. I just can't afford to. This portion of today's video is sponsored by Flago Hearing. I wanted to give you a quick update on the Flago hearing aids I've been testing because I've been wearing them every day now. And honestly, they're working great. I'm watching TV at a much lower volume and I'm not using closed captions at all. That's actually better than I was doing with my $3,000 hearing aids. The background noise I noticed when I first started wearing the Flagos has gotten much better. I still notice it a little in the car, but even that's becoming less noticeable all the time. Today I decided to give them a real test. My granddaughter is one of the people I've always had trouble hearing, so I basically put her to work. I had her talk to me normally, then from another room, and then from behind me, and finally I told her to whisper. I heard every single thing she said. Not one time did I say, "What?" I've also talked to her and my daughter on the phone with no problem, and normally I'm constantly asking both of them to repeat themselves. So at this point, I'm very impressed with the Flago hearing aids, and my granddaughter agrees. She said they're working great. Of course, her professional evaluation did cost me a Starbucks. If you're interested, there's a link in the description and you can check them out. And I started thinking about all of the retirees who are in even tougher situations. What if you don't own anything? What if you're already renting? What if you're retiring on Social Security and maybe a small amount of savings and your rent is already $1,500 or $2,000 a month? There's no $500,000 house to sell. There's no giant pile of equity to invest. The rent is due next month, and the month after that, and the month after that. So what are those people supposed to do? And that got me thinking about a bigger question. What are the actual housing options for regular retirees who don't have a huge pile of money? Not someday with $1 million investment portfolio. Not someday selling a $700,000 house. Just a regular person trying to figure out how to live on the money they've got. So I started thinking about the alternatives. And the first one is probably the most obvious: stay where you are. That might sound like I'm avoiding the question, but for a lot of people, it may actually be the best financial answer. If you've got a paid off house or a condo like mine with relatively low housing cost, replacing that housing can be surprisingly expensive. You might not love where you live. Maybe the house is too big. Maybe you don't like the neighborhood. Maybe you don't want the maintenance anymore. Maybe you just want something different. But then you start looking around and you realize something. I can't replace what I have for what I'm paying now. And suddenly staying put starts looking pretty good. Not because it's your dream retirement, but because the alternatives cost too much. Another possibility is living in an RV or camper. I know there are people who absolutely love this lifestyle. You can travel around the country, see different places, and take your home with you. But I'm actually thinking about something a little different. What if buying a camper and putting it in a campground permanently? Basically using it as inexpensive housing. You still have expenses. You have to buy the camper, you have campground fees, utilities, maintenance, and of course, you're living in a camper. For some people, that's perfectly fine. For others, that's going to be a hard no, but it is an option. Then there's something I hear recommended all of the time: move somewhere cheaper. Okay, where? Because I hear people say this as if there are cities all over America with beautiful $600 a month apartments just waiting for retirees to show up. I'm sure there are places that are cheaper than others, but there's a difference between cheaper and cheap. Maybe instead of $1,800 a month, you find something for $1,200. That's certainly better, but $1,200 is still $14,400 a year. And you also have to ask yourself why you're moving there. Do you have family there, friends, doctors, things you enjoy doing? Or did you just move 500 miles away because the rent was $300 cheaper? At some point, you've got to actually live your retirement, not just survive it as cheaply as possible. Another option is a manufactured or mobile home. And I'll admit this one can look pretty attractive when you first see the price. You might see a manufactured home listed for $60,000 or $80,000 and think, there we go, problem solved. Except sometimes you're buying only the house, not the land underneath it. And now you've got lot rent. And that lot rent can increase just like apartment rent. So you've spent a big chunk of your savings buying a home and you still have a monthly payment to somebody else for the ground it's sitting on. That doesn't automatically make it a bad idea. It might be a great solution for some people, but you have to look at the whole cost. There are also 55 plus communities. Some have condos, some have manufactured homes, some have apartments. And there can be some affordable options. But again, you've got to look past the purchase price. What's the HOA fee? What's the lot rent? What does it cover? How quickly has it been increasing? A cheap house with a big monthly fee attached to it isn't necessarily cheap housing. Then there's senior housing and income-based housing. For retirees with lower incomes, this can be a legitimate solution. Depending on the program, rent may be based partly on your income, which could make housing much more affordable. The problem can be availability. Depending on where you live, there may be waiting list, and not everybody qualifies. Still, if someone is struggling to pay market rate rent on Social Security, it's certainly something worth investigating. There's another option that financially makes a tremendous amount of sense: share housing. Get a roommate, or maybe two retirees share a house and split the expenses. And financially, that could work. Personally, I don't know. I retired so I wouldn't have to deal with people all day. I'm not sure I want to come home and find one living in my kitchen. But for the right people, it could work extremely well. But then there's the option that always gets people's attention: move to another country. Believe me, I've thought about this one. There are places around the world where your retirement income can potentially go considerably further, and I'm fascinated by that idea. But let's not pretend that it's as simple as finding a cheaper apartment. You're moving to another country. You may have a different healthcare system, different laws, possibly a different language. You're farther away from your family. There can be visa requirements. And just because somewhere is inexpensive doesn't mean you want to live there. Again, it's an option. It's not a magic trick. And after thinking through all these possibilities, I realized something. Maybe that's why so many retirees stay exactly where they are. Not because they love their house, not because they've decided it's the perfect place to spend the rest of their life, but because they start looking at the alternatives and realize, I can't afford to leave. And that's a very different conversation than the one I keep hearing about renting versus owning in retirement. Because I don't think the people saying renting can be better are necessarily wrong. If you've got a $500,000 paid off house and a healthy retirement portfolio, selling that house, investing the money in renting might be a fantastic decision. If you've got plenty of retirement income, the freedom of renting might be worth every penny. I get it. I'd consider doing it myself, but that's not everybody's retirement. Somebody else owns a $100,000 house. Somebody else still owes money on theirs. And somebody else owns nothing and is already struggling to pay the rent. Those people need housing solutions too. And I'm not sure we talk about them enough. Maybe the answer is a camper. Maybe it's a manufactured home. Maybe it's moving to a smaller town. Maybe it's senior housing. Maybe it's sharing a house. Maybe it's another country. Or maybe you look at all the choices and realize that the cheapest place for you to live is the place you're already living, even if it's not where you want to be. And maybe that's the real retirement housing problem. There are plenty of places to live. There just aren't many cheap ones. So I'm curious, if you're retired or getting close to retirement, what's your housing situation? Do you own your home? Are you renting? Or have you found another solution that actually works? Because I have a feeling there are a lot more people trying to figure this out than the retirement videos with $500,000 houses would have us believe. Thank you for watching.